and welcome to Unsourced. My name is Elvis, and as always, I am your host. Okay, so it is the first episode of 2019, and like last time, I actually put up a prompt that I will be going over at the end of the show after everything is done with. But first, let's get into what was themed news in the past week. Let's head off into movie news, and one thing I actually want to talk about is the reaction to some of Todd McFarlane's comments on the upcoming Spawn movie, which seems to be rolling back into production again. He has called it a very dark and joyless movie, which prompted a lot of think pieces, and that came off as really odd to me because people were taking a stance about making fun, very lighthearted superhero movies to comments about a Spawn movie, which from the get-go has been talked about as a dark crime movie. So it just felt like really ridiculous that people were taking this sort of like line in the sand. It's not a unique or rare take anymore to want, well, family-friendly or at least very jovial superhero movies. It's been that way since probably the dawn of superhero movies. But for a Spawn movie, it just feels like you're taking it to the level just to mark down that, yeah, you were for fun superhero movies. And there's not really any leverage or weight to the claim that just because Spawn is going to be a darker movie doesn't mean it can also be like very fun or at least really entertaining. Those things aren't joined at the hip, so to speak. So while I found it funny that this really did worry a lot of people, what worried me is that apparently the movie is starting to go into pre-production, but there's still no Twitch casting. We have Sam and once again Jeremy Renner, but there's little to no mention of Twitch or even if he's going to be in the movie at all. So that worries me. Like, what the fuck are they thinking? Moving on to television news, there's not really that much in terms of television news that hasn't already been mentioned or that I won't mention later on. So let's move on to comic news. And one thing that I really thought was pretty interesting was that there was apparently this whole sort of conspiracy theory and digging into Tom King's CIA career. And a lot of people tried to find evidence that he wasn't ever in the CIA. And, well, okay, so I can agree that if they are right, which is a very huge if, then that has something that has some negative consequences all around. But one thing that I found hilarious was that, and with a lot of people who are already buying into the idea that they took it instead on a smaller level, that apparently this devalues the books that he's already worked on. And regardless of how I feel about Tom King's works, and I hate some of them, I like some of them, nothing about that has ever had anything to do with whether or not he was in the CIA. His lack of writing ability, his talent, I never thought about the Vision being like, oh yeah, I like the Vision because wow, that guy was CIA and he can write 10 points on. But it's just so outlandish to have to even delve into that. It feels like such a grasping at straws thing where like, obviously there are some factions that don't like where Tom King is going with some of his books, and I'll talk about reactions to that later. I'm gonna getcha kind of digging in and trying to investigate a person, and it's so laughable and silly. The only other thing in terms of comic news that I feel is interesting to note is Brian Michael Bendis's posting on his social media of character teases of things that he wants to use in the future or that he's currently developing in his series, like Batman Beyond or Legion of Superheroes, or even, oddly enough, OMAC, and that just makes me worried as hell because these are things that are already being used or are being kind of cataloged and shelved off until someone who really does want to use them. So they're all in the sort of flux where you don't really know what Bendis is going to do with them because most of the time it's not going to be good. You're going to get characters that are going to be misused or shuffled off in place of OCs or just killed off in place of OCs, and it's like insane, and it's kind of a worrisome place to be in. And so I hope that with these characters, Bendis doesn't, well, at least do anything too malicious or too ridiculously insipid with them. Best of luck to Kevin Coe, the old New 52 OMAC. Tough break. It really is a tough break for a lot of these. That's it for news in general. Let's move on into what I read this week. Alright, so let's start off with the elephant in the room, which is Heroes in Crisis. And wow, did this get a hugely negative reception, because it seems like finally what everyone could see coming the moment this was announced, the moment we found out what creative team was actually going to be put on it, has finally started, well, sinking in for a lot of people. And it really does feel like, well, what did you expect? I've heard reactions from this comic ranging from it makes Identity Crisis feel like a well-rounded story to Heroes in Crisis could have been something incredibly special. I mean, I can see how you can feel that way. I can definitely understand why people thought that that might have been true if maybe they hadn't read a Tom King book in the last 2 years. It just doesn't work. He has lost his touch in this sense. Although I still love a lot of his one-shots and his previous Maxi series. So, I don't know what the fuck happened, but he definitely has not done a great job in a long time. That he's doing a really, really awful, repetitive, boring, and corny-ass job writing what was meant to be a depthy character piece, the more complex moral and ethical tangents of superhero comics, making its own mark in the sand and, really trying to take all of that and make it into something where people can really truly understand, or at least get a new lease on what it is to be a superhero. That hasn't happened. It really hasn't. It's just a boring as hell murder mystery that doesn't seem to care about being a murder mystery, nor is it really doing anything interesting with the characters, their dilemmas, their personal dramas, or their inner dramas. So it feels like a huge waste of pages after pages after pages. So what we're getting is a lot of people starting to say, well, that the book is overly sexualized, or really sort of wasting the potential of the themes and content of it in terms of how it's trying to convey to the readers, which I find kind of funny because, well, when it's happening to something like Mr. Miracle, it's getting Eisners left and right. But when it happens to the AAA characters, suddenly it's a madhouse. But it's also kind of dour that Tom King has had such a widespread reach that we've been inundated with just awful comics of his for ages, and they're canvassing the widespread DCU, and it's making it so less interesting. And on the other end, you have Scott Snyder doing the exact same thing, and you have so many areas of the DC Comics universe right now which are just kind of unreadable. It just feels like there's no recourse here. And Heroes in Crisis, I think, is the breaking point for a lot, because people at least were expecting a more mature, a more intelligent book, and they're not getting that. So what's the point? If it's not going to be entertaining, if it's not going to be like, say, something that's going to get your mind thinking, then what's the trade-off? So yeah, 2 thumbs down. The only other thing I read this week was The Immortal Hulk, which is still sagging into that point where I'm starting to care about it less and less and less, because it feels like it's going in a direction where it's going to collapse sooner or later. And it's already creaking and straining under it a lot. And what I mean by that is what I've said before, is that Al Ewing is trying to do this dark book, and that works. It has worked before, but now it's trying to do like this more sort of philosophical heaven, hell, metaphysical thing, and that isn't working, because not only was the horror stuff already sort of straining against the average Hulk stuff, but now you have what we're supposed to be thinking about in terms of hell and the sort of more philosophical areas that Al Ewing is trying to sort of impart on the reader. And so you have like a very kind of interesting digression of, well, the sort of idea of hell, which is great. It's honestly well written and I love it, and it really stuck out to me. The next page is, well, Marvel Hell 2-page spread. You have a hotel on the side that says Hotel Hell, and it is just too jarring. It really is. And then you have the characters just sort of blasé, like walking around talking, and it just feels so boring. They're not really sort of acting on or reaching the same level of the bookends. I think that Al Ewing is able to really sort of impart the magnificence of what he's trying to attempt here, but then in the actual story elements are just so average and bland and dull. And it's something where it makes me appreciate less what Al Ewing is trying to do, because if at least we were doing something more standard, then it might be a little more palatable, because we know this is an arc. And we know that this isn't something that's going to be like the status quo for now on, or at least for a long time. So it does come off as kind of silly if we're not fully taking advantage of the loftier ideas, to then also have to hurry them along as well and drown them in the average boring Hulk stuff. And I'm not saying Hulk stuff in general is boring. I said before that the original Hulk runs were interesting because they played so much with the characters and dynamics, and they knew what they wanted to be, and they weren't hewn or strained. They felt very unique, and that's not really present anymore. So yeah, I can't wait for this Hell arc to be over. I can't wait for, well, I hope that the Betty issue that's coming up is going to be good, because there's so much that could be done with that, and that has to be said and has to be hashed out. And I think that Al Ewing is the perfect person to do that. There are some character stuff that I find interesting, but they are overshadowed by just how much nothing goes on, that it feels like a waste of them as well. Joe Bennett is still doing some amazing work too, and sometimes these two things intersect and it makes for a great little panel or a great little beat, but it's too far in between to make this a cohesive read. So yeah, one thumb middle, one thumb down. Anyway, let's move on into what I watched this week. We finally have a lot to talk about. I'm going to start off with The Gifted because I finally got caught up with that and I just feel like I should hash things out a little bit. First things first, I was wrong about the season being over. I had no idea that it was still going on, which isn't a good sign because now it feels like it's been going on for way too long, and there's a lot of reasons why. It's definitely worse than season 1 in a lot of key areas that I thought that they wouldn't rebound on because the first season is still pretty interesting and still very engaging, and this one isn't. It takes all of the short routes. It's overemphasizing melodrama and not really capitalizing on any of the actual plot threads that it had set up or that could have led to a lot of various venues for actual legitimate and grounded drama. You have this whole mutant underground thing that they were bringing up and they're trying to set down. And this season is even subtitled Dawn of the Mutant Age. But instead of doing anything interesting with it, they sort of crush it down by the mid-season and, well, practically completely undo it, which makes sense if you're thinking about this in terms of, say, comic arcs. And it's similar to something that Gotham has done and does, but rather than, say, keep it together for like one whole story arc, Gotham at least has a sensible idea of keeping things to like a serviceable midway boss between arcs. This one just feels like we're rebounding and not really caring or putting the effort to move forward with the narrative, because you also have characterizations and dynamics being affected the same way, where they're all regressing, they're all going back, and it feels like nothing is really ever being done, which is a shame because the first season had that nice rolling effect where everything was always moving forward and progressing, having that momentum. This doesn't have momentum. There are still some things that I really enjoy that I think are neat and kind of fun, kind of interesting, and are still engaging to watch, but it's being, well, suffocated around all these other ridiculous things. And that's a shame because it's something you see so much with comic shows. Given that this was the companion show to Legion, it kind of felt like this might sidestep that a little bit like Legion has so capably. I'm going to wait until the second half of this season finishes up and then see where it's gone because I am not interested in following this week by week, at least for now. Fingers crossed, but overall, 2 thumbs middle. The second thing I watched this week was the season premiere of the final season of Gotham, subtitled Legend of the Dark Knight. And well, this was a great premiere, it really was. And it feels like it could perhaps be the most solid season of Gotham since season 2. Not to say that I didn't like seasons 3 and 4, I really did. But they were always shaky and inconsistent in a way that was at least still entertaining and enjoyable to watch, but were definitely a step down from season 2. This one at least hits the ground running because it sets up tangible stakes that are incredibly high, incredibly, well, fantastical and chaotic in the great way that Gotham can usually provide, and it is hitting so perfectly and so pinpointedly in this episode. We get these long stretches of scenes that really show the scope of the whole no man's land landscape, which is honestly kind of really fun and silly and corny, but again, Gotham has had years to really hone and refine this atmosphere and tone, so you can just totally buy into it and just immerse yourself in it. And that really helps here when you have Scarecrow crucifying people in the street in his own territory and stuff like that. Or one of my favorites, which is just there for one episode, for just this episode, the Low Boys territory, which is just this urban cowboy gang that wears leather hats and leather clothes. Amazing. It's such a perfect way to kick things off. And not only that, but we do have this interesting thing where it's going to be jumping the span of a year. We have the prologue of this episode, which begins on day 361 or so of No Man's Land, which shows Riddler, Penguin, and Gordon having joined forces and laying down, suppressing fire on some unknown threat. And then the next scene, it jumps back to day 86 or so. That is ambitious, and that has me really interested in where this is going to go. And it's a great way to kickstart a final season because you know that things are going to just kind of have this rolling effect and that there is a plan, which has always been one of the hindrances of Gotham, is that sometimes it can feel like there is no plan and that everything's coming off the wheels. And there's a charm in that, and they know the role of that. But this is probably the first time where it does have this sensibility that things are going to lead to something durable. Just does feel like the first chapter is something definite. There are some great scenes, like I said, with the villains, and Penguin has some fantastic lines. Riddler's subplot has this blackly comedic stuff in it. I know that there's been 2 or 3 actors who played Scarecrow throughout the show, and he's really coming to his own as like this sort of enigmatic force in the show, and I love it. I really do. You also get some teases about the Joker and the first appearance with Harley Quinn, because she's in this show now, and we'll see how that goes. But no, yeah, everything does feel like, yeah, we're foreshadowing, we're building things up, things are sort of coalescing and just sort of stalking into the horrible mess that Gotham is in, and it feels really well hewn. One of the most interesting things, though, again, is Bruce. I think Bruce has really sort of come of age in this show, and so his subplot is really trying to make sure that Catwoman is safe, and Catwoman has like this incredibly depressing and starkly dark moment where, of course, she can't walk because they did a whole Killing Joke homage to her last season where Joker just shoots her in the spine and she's paralyzed, and obviously it has taken so much out of her that at one point she jumps out of her bed and tries to hobble her way to a scalpel to kill herself, and it's just this insanely dismal point, and it's still pitch perfect there. A fantastic premiere. There's so many things I love about it that it would take a huge list of pretty much shot by shot everything that I thought this premiere really did so incredibly well. An overall roller coaster ride of a time, in a good way, not in like ups and downs, but more like holy and molies, you know? I can't believe there's only 12 episodes after this. We still have that last 3 episode time skip. Apparently there's so many things going on. We have Ace Chemicals, we have Bane, we have all this ridiculous stuff, and if anything can pull it off, that's gonna be Gotham. Fingers crossed, but 2 thumbs up. Now, if you've noticed at least one high-profile omission from what I've seen this week, there's an explanation for that, and it's going to be coming up as a response to one of the listener questions. So let's start in with that right now. We only have one question this week, and it comes from the incomparable AkiCat on Twitter, and their question was, what did I think of the first 2 seasons of Young Justice? As season 3 is coming out soon, / has come out by the time of this recording and by the time this will be put up. And my answer to that is, I really didn't like them. I gave them a whole bunch of chances to. I would watch a few episodes here, a few episodes there. I would always be just put off by them, by a lot of the sort of tone of it, the writing, the characters. It was just all so off-putting. Now, on a technical level, I won't disparage the show with regards to the character designs, the actors, and the care put into making the show look good. Those all do their jobs well. There's nothing I can really say about them. But like I said before, the sort of narrative of the show and just how the characters acted and were used were just really irritating. And if they weren't being irritating, it felt insanely boring. There was like this emphasis on twists and drama, but the twists and drama came off feeling really forced or boggling. Like, there was this entire thing in the first season about Superboy being down, that Superman doesn't accept him as like a son. Why would he? You can expect him to have some reluctance there. And we get all these really overbearing scenes regarding this plot, and it's not something that couldn't have been done more interestingly or more engaging or a little bit more emotionally fraught. It's a very, very corny plot. Then you have season 2 with its emphasis on twists. This is something that I never liked about Wiseman, and it just gets like so uninteresting when everything has to be part of some sort of this or that plan. It feels so disengaging, and I don't have any attachment to it because everything is in flux. So yeah, I really didn't like these 2 seasons, and I was actually kind of relieved when it got canceled the first time, because you have the second season revealing that there's some sort of fourth world stuff going on too. And I'm like, wow, we dodged a bullet there, because I have no trust that they're going to be able to do the fourth world any justice. But then season 3 got picked up and we got those first images of Orion. I'm like, shit. So I'm not going to put myself through season 3, but I do hope that the fans of this show get what they want. I know that they had a lot of support for the show. There was all these petitions. There was that funding campaign that raised like 1/10 of its goal, because its goal was like $5 billion. So yeah, they worked hard for this. I hope they have a great time. So yeah, thank you for that question, AkiCat. I hope I put it to the best of my ability. And if you like the show, I hope I didn't say anything untoward. And if you do like it, like I said, I do hope that you get a lot of enjoyment out of it. Thank you for that. And with that, we move on into the listener prompt, which I set out as a way to sort of commemorate the dawn of 2019, and my prompt was, what are you most excited for in 2019 regarding comics? And, well, we got some responses, and I thought they were all really, really good. All right, so first off, we have one from the great Medea, and their response was Second Coming, which, if you don't know about it, you should. It is the new Vertigo comic that's coming out, I think it may be like March, from Mark Russell, and it's about Jesus coming back to Earth, sent by God to pair up with the world's greatest superhero called Sunman. And it is probably my most anticipated Mark Russell comic ever, for one simple reason, because he's done such a great job with religion before. He did his whole duology of books called God is Disappointed with You and Apocrypha Now, which were short summaries of Bible books and aspects of the Bible. That did a great job really distilling each and every part of the Bible into something that was honestly cutting and satirical, but also fitting for the actual text that it was drawing from. Pretty much an amazing thing to go around with. So to hear that he's finally tackling and delving back into religion again, with Jesus himself being a main character in his new comic, and I'm just unbearably excited to see what comes out of that. Fingers crossed. But thank you for that idea. I think that looks like a great thing. Next up, we have one from AkiCat, and what they're excited for this year is War of the Realms by Jason Aaron, Daredevil by Chip Zdarsky, plus Martian Manhunter, and to a lesser extent, Justice League and Justice League Dark, which they find interesting enough. I'm excited as well for Martian Manhunter. I thought the first issue was honestly well done. There are some quibbles here or there, but it seems like Orlando's strongest effort in years. And I'm excited for number 2 because I want to see if he can actually pull it off or if it's just a one-time. And, well, with regards to War of the Realms, I'm just glad that Jason Aaron is finally hitting the end point of whatever thing he's been building up for, because there's been so many pit stops in it that I felt were really unnecessary, but I'm glad that it's finally reached the apex. Daredevil by Chip Zdarsky, I might check that out. I like Chip Zdarsky. A lot of times I find his comics kind of boring, but I will check it out to see what's what, because he's been really trying to, I think, ape in a way Venom's marketing in terms of advertising and promoting Daredevil by himself. So yeah, that might be worth something. So thank you for that, AkiCat, and I can't wait to see what's up. So our last one comes from Eggmath, and what they're excited for in 2019 is the continuations of Outer Darkness and Chainsaw Man, which they call 2 comics that started at the tail end of 2018 that instantly hooked them and that show a lot of promise. So they're excited to see them develop. That sounds really, really great. And, well, I decided to actually go out and try out at least Outer Darkness, because it seems like Chainsaw Man is available on Show and Jump. I don't really have a way to read that right now, so that'll have to wait, but I'm pretty sure it's good because Outer Darkness was really good too. I had a great time with that. It felt like it ticked off a lot of boxes on my checklist, and apparently me and Layman are on the same wavelength, because at the end of the first issue, he mentions all this stuff that he enjoys about sci-fi and horror, and the merging of the two, at least in terms of space travel, and even name checks Event Horizon, which I felt like this was definitely Event Horizon meets like Star Trek or these spacefaring adventures, but also in a universe where outer space itself is, well, hell. That there is like these really hellish demonic forces in space where everything is unknowable and farther from God than we are. So that was really great, and it was really a lot of fun, and I can't wait to see what happens to that too. Thank you so much, Eggmath, and thank you so much to everyone who responded. I guess what I'm excited for in 2019 is not so much anything new, which there are things that I'm excited for in regard to that, like say the MGMT Omnibus editions, which I am definitely gonna cop, or that the Sons of El Topo is coming out and is being released. But what I'm most excited about has to be the things that are out right now ending, like The Wicked and Divine, or Scooby Apocalypse, or Made Here Tonight. I love a good ending. I want to see things wrap up. I want to see where things really do try to get some closure or finality. With these 3 ones I mentioned, like Scooby Apocalypse, that needs to end. That needs to end this year, and it's already setting up the perfect ending. So if it misses that shot, that'll be so detrimental to the work as a whole. So I hope it ends, and I hope it's a great ending. And Mage, that's finally ending after decades, and it seems like it could hit that landing, and if it does, then it'll be like perfect. Wicked and Divine, I've always been more interested in the story than the characters, and the story is pretty engaging. I love it. I love seeing how the story unfolds, and finally getting to like the last 4 or so issues. It's kind of, well, insane, and I really do hope that they are able to hit that mark, because they don't really hit that mark anywhere else in their comics. And by that, I mean McKelvey and Gillen. So it's kind of astounding to see that happen here. And yeah, there's a lot more things, but those are the first that come to mind when it comes to 2019. Just hoping that things finally, well, take a victory lap and don't flail out. So yeah, here's hoping for a great new year. Thank you guys so much, and thank you to everybody. I hope that every single one of you has had a great New Year's Eve, and will have a great start, middle, and ending to this new year, because you guys all deserve it, and it's amazing. And thank you guys so much for staying around with this show as much as I've been doing it. It's been quite a ride. And even right now, even half a year we've been doing this, it's been really humbling, and thank you guys. Thank you all. So I want to give one last shout out to at DOTEMCEE for doing the cover art for this. I hope they have a great new year too. And check out their page and check out their commissions. They do such amazing work, and they really deserve to be more well known. And if anyone out there has their own questions, comments, or topics, they can always contact me on my Twitter at THE_SNICKMAN. And well, that's it for this episode. Thank you all. Hope you have a great week, and see you then.